Stay connected to your community and save. Just 99 cents a month gets you 3 months of unlimited access to Inform.com. Visit Inform.com/subscribe and get your first 3 months of news for only 99 cents a month.
The Forum archives are full of hundreds of stories about Halloween celebrations, struggles, and shenanigans. Here are 5 that might make you smile. Hi, this is Tracy Briggs, and welcome to this week's episode of Back Then. Well, I've said it before that one of the best parts about writing a history-related column is that it allows me to get lost in the archives, digging through stacks and stacks of old newspapers and scrolling through microfilm until I feel motion sick. Seriously, I do get a little motion sick when I'm scrolling through the microfilm. I'm wondering if anybody else has that experience. Librarians or archivists. Do you take Dramamine? I don't know. It usually just means I need to stop scrolling through the microfilm and start actually writing. Anyway, let's get on with this. What better time to actually look for some of these Halloween stories than at Halloween? After all, how many horror movies start with someone stumbling upon something old and spooky in an old trunk in the attic, or tucked away in a crate in the basement? Well, the Forum archives aren't quite that scary. It's just a big file drawer-filled room about halfway between the center newsroom table, where very kind editors occasionally give us donuts, and the feature department desk, where Tammy Swift and I occasionally relish in our shared love for Sean Cassidy. But the other day, I put my donut down, and I run my way down to the archives to sift through old newspaper clippings to see what I could learn about Halloween's past. There were hundreds of stories, of course, but I chose 5 that I found particularly interesting. The first one, Reese's or running backs. Halloween revelers in Mahnomen, Minnesota had a choice to make in 1986. Stay home, celebrate, and answer the door to trick-or-treaters, or go to Breckenridge, Minnesota to watch the high school football team play for the Section 8 championship. But a group called Women of Today, which had replaced the Women's JC organization, well, they didn't want people to have to make such a tough choice. So they proposed that the town move Halloween up one night to October 30th. The group approached Mayor John Mercy, who then signed a proclamation making it so. Mahnomenites who loved Halloween and high school football could have their cake, or should we say candy, and eat it too. So, trick-or-treating would be October 30th, and the football game against Breckenridge, October 31st. It was a great idea, and presumably the trick-or-treaters loved it, but it didn't go so well for the Mahnomen High School football team, who fell to Breckenridge 13-3. Trick-bur-treat. Well, anyone who lives in the upper Midwest can tell you Halloween weather is a real crapshoot. Some years it isn't too bad. I remember taking my kids trick-or-treating and I barely even had a jacket on. It was that warm. But other years, yikes, the weather can be so cold and blustery, costumes basically lose all semblance of meaning, disguised under parkas and snow boots. I remember back in the early 70s, I was so excited to dress like Barbara Eden from I Dream of Jeannie. I prayed the weather would be nice, but alas, freezing drizzle dampened my Jeannie ponytail and made my harem pants cling to the sides of my legs like saran wrap on a frozen pork chop. The fun-sized candy bars I devoured later were little consolation. Anyway, 1984 was also one of those chilly years. Trick-or-treaters in the region that year battled below zero wind chills as a cold front blew in from Canada like a witch on a tricked-out broomstick. Williston, North Dakota broke a record from 1911 with a low temperature of 4 degrees below zero. That is in October, everybody. Some chose to have indoor parties that year. Others let the kids trick-or-treat and presumably broke out the cocoa when they got home. Right on the kisser. The archives are full of stories about Halloween costume trends, how movies, TV, and music dictate what kids wear. Now, this is where it's such a shame this is a podcast and you can't see this photo, because this was one of my favorite photos I found. It was of a group of North Fargo boys in 1978 as part of a fundraiser for Ben Franklin Middle School. They were made up to look like the rock band Kiss. Chris Ogle, I hope I'm probably saying that wrong, his brother Sean, Mitch Hansen and Stacey Matter chose makeup representing Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley, Ace Frehley, and Peter Criss. If anyone knows these boys, who of course now would be in their 50s, I'd love to hear more about their night as rock stars. I might even suggest a reenactment of this photo for Halloween 2022. And if you want to see the photo I'm talking about, of course, you can go to inform.com and it's right there. But it's basically the boys putting makeup on to look like Kiss. It's pretty cute. Some real little rascals. During Halloween 1933, Fargo was dealing with a group of troublemakers. 6 young men were charged with malicious mischief for pulling fire alarms on Halloween night. The forum didn't release their names, but said they all came from prominent Fargo families. A report from the farm said parents, police, and civic leaders were calling Halloween 1933 the roughest Halloween night in recent years. Citizens were told if they were missing any items from their yards, things like garbage cans, fencing, or mailboxes, they needed to go down to the city warehouse where crews stashed the items that hooligans had strewn about town throughout the night. Officials said they believed they were faced with big decisions regarding Halloween. They either had to abolish all Halloween privileges and were going to have to instruct police officers to, quote, keep the streets entirely free of boys on Halloween, or they needed to find something else for the naughty boys to do. Well, later the paper reported that a man named Fred Mogg, who had long been interested in character-building activities for young folks, suggested Fargo Moorhead host a big show at the AC, or put on some kind of athletic contest. FYI, the AC, that is basically North Dakota Agriculture College, which would later become North Dakota State University. Well, Fred said he wanted to make this a night of pleasant entertainment with nothing sissy about it, a show or series of shows which every young person in the city would be eager to attend, and heaven forbid anything is sissy. Fortunately, the very next year, the Junior Chamber of Commerce, better known as the JCs, stepped up, agreeing to host Halloween parties for youth of all ages. They hosted these parties for years and later staged haunted houses in town. Gate night is trick to Halloween's treat. Speaking of mischief, for the people in New England, North Dakota, it happens the night before Halloween on something they called Gate Night. In 1979, a forum reporter talked to a man named John Dubasar, who had lived in New England since 1906. He remembered Gate Night way back then. He recalls one in 1915 where some boys got a hold of a threshing machine and then pulled it down to the hotel using Model Ts and then just let it sit there. Dubasar said he wasn't sure why October 30th, the night of pranks, was called Gate Night, but he guessed that it stemmed from some kids stealing the gates on people's fences and then hiding them. Well, upon further research, it appears Gate Night has its origins in England and is also called Devil's Night, Goosey Night, Moving Night, Cabbage Night, and Mat Night. It is celebrated still in a few communities in the U.S. and Canada, and of course some places still in England. If you have any great old Halloween stories, I'd love to hear from you. My email address is tracy.briggs@formcom.com. Thanks again for listening to this week's episode of Back Then. We'll check back with you next week.
Get reliable and accurate local news with inform.com. Inform.com is your trusted local news source with journalists dedicated to keeping you informed about what's happening in your community. Visit inform.com now.